The laws of probability and chance indicate that if an infinite number of monkeys are given typewriters and allowed to peck away for an infinite time, they will eventually produce all the world's great literature. But in the process, we find monkeys, like humans, also turn out quite a bit of absolute junk.
In the world of literature, self-publishing is a double-edged sword. It's a method that gives writers total creative freedom, which is great in the hands of those who take the craft seriously, but it also means anyone with some money to burn can put whatever they want into print. Quality control be damned. This has led to more than a few amateurs with delusions of grandeur taking their unedited first draft, putting it onto the marketplace, and then defending their work with religious fervor. One such person was Gloria Tesch. Author of the self-published Maradonia saga and self-proclaimed world's youngest novelist, Gloria became infamous online during the early 2010s when she and her family attempted to convince the world she was the next big thing in fantasy literature. They even went so far as to make a movie that allegedly bankrupted the family, quite literally putting them out of house and home. Nowadays, however, her name is rarely spoken, even in circles where she was once a common topic of mockery. Many of the videos she put out have been privated, and her Maradonia books have practically been wiped off the web. So, in this episode of the RUSE Cruise, let's explore the rise and fall of Gloria Tesch. It began in early 2009 when multiple users on Yahoo Answers and Wiki Answers began making posts with the same question: who is the world's youngest novelist? Rather than wait for other users to provide answers, each one of these posters would immediately respond to their own question, and all of them gave the same answer. I have done some research, and it seems to be that the author of Maradonia and the Seven Bridges is Gloria Tesch, who is now 14. She wrote an 800-page novel when she was 11, and finished it when she was 13. And it seems to me that she actually is the youngest novel writer in the world. I mean, there are some who wrote short stories or poems, but not a humongous novel. When I heard about her, I immediately bought a copy to read this magnificent novel. When I have read, it was the most phenomenal thing I ever read. It is a fiction fantasy and just a magnificent novel. See for yourself. Maradonia.com. Do you know about her? The sock puppetry was less than subtle. This blatant self-advertising on its own would be enough to piss people off. Things went from bad to worse, however, as users began pointing out Gloria Tesch wasn't even the world's youngest novelist like she was claiming to be. In particular, Nancy Yee Fan had her novel Swordbird published through HarperCollins when she was just 12. But rather than slink off and try marketing her book in a different way, Gloria doubled down and continued spamming Yahoo and Wiki Answers to the point that moderators had to step in to delete posts and log questions to stop her from editing them. Yeah, I was also surprised to learn Yahoo Answers had mods. This broke what little goodwill people may have been willing to give Gloria for being a dumb 14-year-old who was clearly sheltered by her parents. So, internet users did what they do best when someone pisses them off. They began digging to find out just who this Gloria kid was. Those who visited the Maradonia website were greeted with the cover of the first book, Maradonia, trademark, and the Seven Bridges. The cover art featured what looks like a poorly drawn Madonna turning into a Gorgon with the world's worst case of oral herpes. There was also a free excerpt of the first 40 pages with gripping writing like, "One November morning in Oceanside, a mysterious beach was found in a forbidden area. 15-year-old Maya and her 14-year-old brother Joey noticed a gap in the fence of a government-owned property. That's when they found the entrance to a cave. Soon they discovered that this cave led to a tunnel system which opened up to a different world. They found a world between the worlds, the land of Maradonia. The feast was being prepared at the palace of Apollyon, the king of the evil empire. At the oval table was enough room for 70 of the most high-ranking rulers of the evil empire.
I'm not spick and span. I don't clean the area between my crotch and legs.
It quickly became apparent that the book was self-published, especially when the book's publisher, Liberty Books Press, turned out to be a company owned by Gloria's dad, Gloria Tesch, and the Maradonia books were the only things they'd ever worked on. The site also gave a glimpse into who this Gloria kid was and the story behind her work. She was a teenager living in Florida with her parents, Gary and Marina Tesch, as well as her 2 younger brothers. She began writing Maradonia, trademark, and The 7 Bridges all the way back in 2006 as part of a 6th grade creative writing assignment. There's conflicting information on whether or not she was homeschooled, but the general consensus leans towards the latter, so that's what I'm going with. Anyway, she enjoyed the story she came up with so much that she continued writing it even after the assignment was over, using her allowance to buy journals so she could work in private. When her family found out about it, they encouraged her to keep going, and even pitched in to help with the story. Her mother drew art of the characters and settings, her father helped with research, and her brother Jonathan helped with dialogue. On the surface, this actually sounds really wholesome. In an ideal world, Maradonia would have remained this family project for years until Gloria had enough practice and skill to write something actually worth publishing. It's great when kids are interested in the arts. Their creativity should be encouraged, but they also need time to learn and grow. Even so-called child prodigies need support and challenges, lest they become stunted as they reach adulthood. But we live in this world, and instead of hanging Maradonia on the fridge next to crayon art and good report cards, Gloria's parents decided the rest of the world needed to see her stories. And they were seemingly flush with cash to make it happen. When exactly Maradonia and the 7 Bridges was published depends on who you want to believe, and this marks the beginning of a trend throughout the Tesch's quest for fame and something that made this story an absolute pain in the ass to research. They think they can just retcon reality. According to Gary, The 7 Bridges was published in April 2007, on Gloria's 13th birthday, as a gift, which, while horribly misguided, could at least be seen as a sweet gesture. But this conflicts with one of Gloria's blog posts and an old news article, both on the official Maradonia website, which state the book wasn't published until August 2007, and talk about Gloria having to spend her entire summer break writing without even being allowed to see her friends. Whoever you choose to believe, by late 2007, Gary and Marina had this book and believed their daughter had what it takes to be the next Tolkien. So, did she?
Maya knew immediately what Joey was thinking. "Let's go there," Joey finally said. "Yeah? How?" Maya asked sarcastically. "Over the tree, dumb shit," he replied back, pointing to a broken tree leaning over the fence and making a way like a bridge from one side to the other side. "Can't you read the sign, Joey?" Maya asked. "Imagine what could happen to us, and how much trouble we could get into." Joey was already on the tree, struggling to keep his balance. "Are you even listening to me?" Yeah, whatever," he replied back, still keeping his balance on the tree. Then he jumped off the tree and was already on the other side. "Get back here!" Maya yelled. "Shut up and get your ass over the damn fence!"
No, she didn't. Even by child writer standards, Maradonia and the 7 Bridges is not good. I don't say that to be mean-spirited or to dunk on a little kid. Like I said, it's great when children pursue creative interests. But if you're going to charge $25 for something a 13-year-old wrote, it better be above and beyond a C-grade middle school English paper. Despite Gary supposedly hiring an editor, it's full of basic grammar errors, syntax errors, and spelling errors. The characters are flat, with no rhyme or reason to their behavior. The 2 main characters, Maya and Joey, are self-insert Mary Sues, something even Gloria admitted to in interviews. There's a bizarre obsession with putting names or dialogue that's supposed to be deep in italics and quotation marks. What little world building there is makes no sense. It's just a mess. As for what the books are about, they're Narnia ripoffs. 2 siblings named Maya and Joey get isekai'd into a magical world where they have to fight off the forces of evil with the help of talking animals and a king that's an obvious stand-in for Jesus. There's some evil guy named Apollyon and his 2 sons who try to tempt the main characters and are stand-ins for Satan. Maya and Joey keep going between the regular world and the magical world as they're needed, and they can get away with it because a year in the magical world is only a couple minutes in the real world. But where C.S. Lewis's Christian allegories are weaved into the story in such a way that they aren't beating you over the head, Gloria just straight up plagiarized the Bible. If it sounds like I'm cutting a lot of plot points, I'm not. That 810 page count wasn't achieved through tons of action and adventure or even tons of filler. I mean, there is tons of filler, but not 800 pages worth. The book was that thick because it was printed in a large font with generous margins. Rough estimates put the word count at 60,000, or about 150 pages when properly formatted. So the Tesches blew thousands upon thousands of dollars on putting Gloria's books into print. But because it's all self-published, they're not getting into major bookstores, nor do they have the support of a publishing house that'll promote the books for them. And no amount of poorly staged photos at Books A Million or local libraries was going to change that. So, how are they going to sell these books? By throwing as many lies and dollars at the wall as possible until something stuck. Which brings us back to 2009. As I mentioned before, internet users were not happy with Gloria abusing sites like Yahoo Answers and Wiki Answers to promote herself. Word began to spread on forums and sites like LiveJournal as users warned others about this kid who was trying to lay claim to achievements she hadn't rightfully earned. One place that became a hub of criticism against her was Anti-Shertugal, a LiveJournal group dedicated to criticizing Christopher Paolini's Inheritance cycle. The first 40 pages being available from the Maradonia website for free fueled the mockery against Gloria as people began sporking her work, aka writing Mystery Science Theater style riffings. She even ended up with an Encyclopedia Dramatica article. In response, Gloria and her family became openly hostile towards critics. They started insulting other young authors like Nancy Yi Fan, saying she didn't deserve to be called the world's youngest novelist because Gloria's book was bigger. Although Nancy Lee Fan's novel Swordbird was published by HarperCollins in 2007 when she was 13 years old, Swordbird contains, in her book, only about 150 pages or so, excluding her blank pages with a simple line and pictures overtaking a whole page with a couple of sentences. Yes, she was younger than Gloria Tesch when she completed her short story, but she did not defeat the Battle of the Pages to officially make it a novel. Because of this, she cannot claim the title The World's Youngest Novelist, based on her 200-page story, compared to the 800-plus page novelist Gloria Tesch. As if Gloria's book wasn't an artificially inflated mess with a word count similar to Nancy's book. Gloria also began starting fights in Amazon review comments and in the comment sections of sites that talked about her, always under a sock account, of course. Dear ugly fat boy, Gloria Tesch loved it when you criticized her story, and how could you criticize a book which you never read before? Ha 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 ha! And it was I who wrote that comment on your stupid motherfucking page, haha. You're one stupid little gay ass. I emailed it to her and she was laughing her ass off, cause criticism made her money. Keep it coming. Don't get me wrong, child. Her book is phenomenal. Her story is amazing. Not her grammar or spelling. And plus, she wrote the beginning when she was 11. You will be ashamed of yourself when you read her whole book, and not the worst part of it, shitbag. BTW, I'd love to see your fat jelly rolls flabber around in a parody of an upcoming motion picture film. You will die of embarrassment. Ha 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 ha! Grow up and learn that real criticism is helpful and not little fat children shitting around making stupid gay-ass videos. Good luck on that video, shitbag. If I ever see your fatness around my neighborhood, I'll make you shit your pants. You are a disgrace to the world. Fuck off, nigga. I'm just a reader with a good taste in literature. Guys, please don't cancel Gloria. She was like 14 when she wrote this, and it was over 10 years ago. I'm not here to call anyone out. I'm just here to laugh at the funny. Just laugh at the funny. Come on. She would also post links to a video of her getting into a fist fight with another girl, in what may have been an attempt to frighten critics into silence. It didn't work. This video has since been removed from YouTube for violating community guidelines. I guess the only brawls allowed on this hell site are those Chuck E. Cheese Smackdown compilations. Gloria's bad behavior probably did lead to the biggest sale of books she and her family ever saw, as people began picking up copies just to tear apart her poor writing skills. The Tesches made sure to delete negative comments and reviews from their own web pages whenever possible, but on Amazon and Goodreads, it was a different story. Negative reviews quickly outnumbered the positive reviews from the Tesch's sock accounts, tanking the ratings from 5 stars to 1 or 2 stars. While things on the internet weren't panning out for the Tesches, the real world seemed to be a little less harsh. In August 2009, Gloria went on a local radio show to promote her book and build hype for the upcoming release of the second book, Maradonia, trademark, and The Gold of Ophir. The two hosts spent most of their time fawning over Gloria and promoting her as a great writer, though noticeably they don't talk about anything specific from the books. In the interview, Gloria revealed something even bigger than the upcoming new book.
Did you know that Maradonia will be a Maradonia Adventure Park one day?
Oh, now that's
Is that what you have
big.
planned?
I have a concept for 9 different novels, so it will be more than just 3 books. But the Maradonia Adventure Park, we're planning it to be a little bit north of Tampa, so around the Wiki Wachi area.
Okay.
So
Cool.
That's great.
It's still in the first part of the development, so
Sure.
I can't tell the
No,
How
no,
exciting she is, huh?
Keep in mind, this was a year before the Wizarding World of Harry Potter theme park opened, and years before Avatar, the highest-grossing film of all time, got its own theme park. Needless to say, the Maradonia Adventure Park never came to fruition. It really is a shame, because it would have made for a great Defunctland video. Maradonia and the Gold of Ophir was published in the fall of 2009. It was just as much of an artificially bloated brick as the first one, and just as bad. Though at least the cover of this one wasn't a total eyesore, so the Tesches were improving on at least one front. But the release of the second book was quickly overshadowed by even bigger news. It's hard to pinpoint when exactly the movie announcement happened, but in her February 2010 newsletter, Gloria announced she had finished writing the screenplay for the film adaptation of Maradonia and the Seven Bridges, and she was set to be both an executive producer and the lead actress. This announcement included a collage-style movie poster made almost entirely of copyrighted material, including a frame from the Disney film The Chronicles of Narnia: Prince Caspian. Put a pin in this, we'll be coming back to it in a bit. Gloria claimed she had gotten offers from New York, like the entire state of New York, I guess, but opted to turn them down because the offers were too low, and she was worried these unnamed studios would change the story without her approval. Since they were still in early pre-production, there was no word on when exactly the movie would be released. In the meantime, Gloria had something else to keep her small fan base and her larger hater base entertained. She wouldn't just be appearing on the silver screen. She was going to be on your home TV. It was called The Gloria Tesch Show, a 42-episode series where Gloria would read a chapter from her books for an hour. What they didn't mention was the show was through public access, meaning that, much like her book publishing, it's available to anybody with some money to burn. The show began airing in January of 2010. Anti-Chertogal users found a way to watch the show online on February 27th, and even planned to mess with Gloria over the phone. But when they tried to tune in that night, they were sorely disappointed. 15 minutes in and nothing. It shows her on the schedule, but nothing doing. It's already 7:30 and the damn show still didn't start. They blocked out her show and are now showing some exercise show. That's an hour I'll never get back. It's possible that the show failed to air that night because somebody had contacted Disney as well as the artist Louise Royo about the Tesches using their material in the Maradonia movie promotional poster. Around March 3rd, 2010, Gloria made a Facebook post indicating some kind of legal action had been threatened. The post has been lost to time as far as I can tell. Now, I could be wrong on the reason the show was cancelled that night. The timing is just really suspicious to me. But the Tesches would not let this get in the way of their daughter rising to her true celebrity potential. It was around this time that Gary got the bright idea that having lots of books to Gloria's name would be more impressive than having 2 giant books. So they split both The Seven Bridges and The Gold of Ophir in half and announced that Maradonia would now be a 6-book trilogy. I'm not even joking, Gary actually called it that. The series was now made up of The Seven Bridges, Escape from the Underworld, The Gold of Ophir, and The Dragon Riders, with plans for the final book to also be split into 2, The Law of Blood and Battle for the Key. Along with the split came several changes. The prologue was completely changed from an in media res scene of an evil empire meeting to an elementary classroom scene where a teacher named Professor Epstein tells the kids about the story of Maya and Joey. Other changes seem to have been made so it would be easier to adapt aspects of the book into a film. The talking animals were changed into shape-shifting elves and dwarves, Maya and Joey were made a little older, some swearing was cut out to make it more kid-appropriate, some grammar and spelling errors were fixed. Oh, and 9/11 was turned into the catalyst for Maya and Joey going off to save a fantasy world.
At the end of the age, in the last days, when the two silver birds attack the twin brothers, two children, yes, two children will arrive in your land, and these children will show you your limitations.
I can only think of one reason why they thought this was a good idea. You see, Nancy Yi Fan began writing Swordbird as a way of dealing with the trauma of witnessing the September 11th attacks, shortly after moving from China to New York with her family. Almost every news article about her talks about this. But as far as I know, there's no direct mention of 9/11 in her books. She just used that pain to fuel her story about good triumphing over evil and the importance of peace. But the Tesches, having neither tact nor talent, and still pissed about Nancy being a younger published novelist than Gloria, decided to just make 9/11 part of the fucking prophecy in her books. The reason I think this is the case is, it was also around this time that the Tesches began retconning Gloria's history, again, to try and further discredit Nancy. Now they claimed Gloria had begun writing her books at age 10 and published them when she was 12. I guess they thought no one would notice and forgot that Gloria had got on the record through both spoken and written word about when exactly the book was published. The funniest thing about this is, even if it was true, it still wouldn't make Gloria the world's youngest novelist because Daisy Ashford published her novella, The Young Visitors, when she was just 9. I love the mental image of the Tesches angrily typing potshots at Nancy, who probably doesn't even know they exist because she's too busy hanging out with Martha Stewart and Oprah. Going back to some of the less horrifically tasteless changes, the prologue may have been changed as a way of trying to paint critics in a bad light. Remember that comment from Not Gloria, saying the excerpt people were using to judge the book was the worst part? Well, a few months after the books were split and the prologue was changed, Gloria made a Facebook post saying that the original 40-page excerpt, the one that was advertised on her site for nearly a year and was identical to the first 40 pages of the first edition of The Seven Bridges, was actually an unedited early manuscript that leaked without her permission. So don't believe what those damn dirty critics say, because they're going off bad information and upsetting this poor girl. To be fair, she's at least honest about it being unedited. On June 10th, 2010, Gloria was actually featured in a segment on the show Celebrity Soup, hosted by the beloved Kyle Kendrick. You guys remember that show from back in the day? Yeah, neither do I, because it was something made up by Gary. The whole thing was actually a book trailer with actors brought in to pretend to be fans. The Tesches would later try to claim it was all, quote, obvious comic satire, unquote, but what's obvious is the trailer was made this way to dupe the unaware into thinking Gloria was famous. Throughout the video, they tried to hype her up as the next big name in literature, saying her books aren't in stores because they're flying off the shelves faster than publishers can print them.
You know, despite the demand for her books, the publisher only prints a finite amount, and when they're sold out, they're gone. And that's not just here, that's all over the country.
This was, of course, a lie. The reason her books weren't in stores is because bookstores, big and small, generally don't carry self-published books. I'm not going to show the whole trailer here, but I highly recommend it if you want 3 minutes of pure delusional wish fulfillment and some grade A acting.
King Astrodulus? Where are you? I am here to kill you! Take your land and your head!
You have killed many kings, but today is not your day.
If you haven't heard, Gloria Tesch is the world's youngest novelist. At the age of 15, she has already written 8 novels.
6 books, 2 screenplays.
Why have we been brought into this totally different world?
I don't know, Joey.
Joey, but I believe everything happens for a reason.
It's myriad of a modern-day fantasy that completely takes you out of your element.
Some people are even asking for autographs in the most precarious of places.
Let the adventure begin.
This is garbage.
After this, the release of the 5th book, Maradonia and the Law of Blood, was postponed until 2011. By December 2010, the Tesches were finally meeting with actors. Maradonia and the Seven Bridges, the movie, was slated to wrap production by April 2011, which just went to show how little Gloria and her family actually understood about the filmmaking process. Short films can have a hard time wrapping up in such a narrow time window, but a feature-length fantasy movie that they claimed would be on the same level as The Lord of the Rings? That was going to take years. On January 25th, 2011, a short trailer for the film was released. It was just some stock CG footage, the book's cover, and some text on a black screen. Riveting. Just as the Tesches were making the shift from the written word to moving pictures, so too were the critics. Multiple videos mocking and criticizing Gloria and her parents were being posted to YouTube. One of the most popular was by Swank Ivy, who thoroughly debunked many of the Tesches' claims about Gloria's supposed celebrity status. She even went as far as to call multiple bookstores in Florida to prove nobody was carrying the Maradonia books.
Nothing's showing up for Gloria Tesch. I do not fit with anything in our system.
Comes up no such item. Apparently something we are not able to get.
Nothing came up for that.
Well, if it's a self-published like that, they often don't get into the big box stores.
And I did not get any hits with them. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we carry anything of hers.
I didn't pull anything up. No record found.
But remember what I said about the Tesches deleting criticism wherever they could? Well, by moving from sites like LiveJournal to YouTube, the critics had opened themselves up to YouTube's easily abused copyright system. And abuse that system, Gary Tesch certainly did. Around March 15th, 2011, Gary filed DMCA takedown requests against at least a dozen YouTube videos that were critical of Gloria and the Maradonia books. On top of removing the videos from the site, this also put strikes on all affected channels, and reportedly even resulting in one critic losing their channel entirely. Swank Ivy, not happy with this turn of events, republished her video, this time with all pictures and videos of Gloria removed and replaced with MS Paint drawings to prevent Gary from taking it down again. There's no figures for how many views her video had before being struck down, but today the revised version has nearly 40,000 views, beating out much of the official Maradonia promotional videos in terms of view count. Soon though, it wouldn't just be critics the Tesches had to be worried about. The complaints were about to come from the inside. In May of 2011, it was discovered that the director for the Maradonia movie, Troy Bowman, had been replaced by Evans Isamopoulos. There had been no announcement for this change, which seemed odd for something so major as a new director. Nearly a month later, the reason for this would be made clear. Pauline Amadeus Morris, the cinematographer for the film, used the Maradonia movie Facebook account to announce that he had left the project along with Troy Bowman and producer Patricia Sophia. He explained that Gary had failed to draft written contracts and never paid him or Troy for countless hours of prep work. As for Patricia, Gary had agreed to pay her a finder's fee if she could find someone willing to invest $30,000 into the film. But upon meeting with one of her Wall Street contacts, Gary went behind her back and tried to work out a deal on his own to get out of paying what he had promised her. The rest of the complaints about Gary being incompetent when it comes to producing films weren't too shocking, but his refusal to pay multiple crew members, including producer Andrew Fisher and casting director Catherine Laughlin, who also left around this time, was surprising. This was a guy who had the money to finance the self-publication of several books and a whole-ass book trailer, and he was rich enough to even consider making a feature-length fantasy film. Why was he being so cheap and fucking over some of the most vital crew? The answer would be discovered in early 2012. An impish idea commenter named Kurt posted some things they'd uncovered about Gary's past. They began by comparing a picture of Gary to a picture of a guy named Günther Tesch, who had been a gospel singer and Christian writer in Germany during the 1970s. Sure enough, Gary was a complete match to Günther. For further proof, Kurt pointed out that Günther Tesch had written a book titled The Sun Over Maramon, and in an old interview, Gloria said she got the idea for the name Maradonia from the town of Maramon, where Gary had attended religious conferences. This information led Kurt to a Der Spiegel article from 1985 about charity fraud. It turned out that prior to leaving Germany and settling in America, Gary was the director of a religious charity organization called the Hamburg International Missionary Aid Service. The article accused Gary of buying and selling the information of high-paying donors in order to rake in millions in donations, almost all of which would be pocketed rather than go to the causes they promised. He had been placed under numerous police investigations for these acts, and in at least one case, was full-on convicted of fraud. While I'm one who likes to believe people can better themselves, it was clear from the 2011 film crew complaints that Gary hadn't changed his ways in nearly 30 years, and the wealth he spoiled Gloria with was likely obtained through ill-begotten means. Any sane person would have cut their losses by this point. Well, I mean, any sane person would never have gotten to this point in the first place, but I digress. Despite losing so much of their crew, including the new director Evan Zsimopoulos, Gary and Gloria doubled down on producing the movie. The fifth book in the franchise, Maradonia and the Law of Blood, was published in the summer of 2012 with some fanfare, but it was clear the focus was no longer on the books, especially as the sixth in the series, The Battle for the Key, was completely forgotten, despite all the marketing saying it was finished.
I'm at the Reading Festival. This is my latest novel, Maradonia and the Law of Blood.
You've written how many books?
I've written 6 novels.
6 novels.
These are all 6 novels.
All right, let's look at the 6 novels. Oh my goodness, you've been busy.
Andrew Fisher eventually returned to working with Gary, and on November 11th, 2012, they released a new trailer for the film, which, I shit you not, is just 18 seconds of a guy riding a horse. Oh, and 2 seconds of some guy in a Santa outfit reading from a book, which I'm pretty sure is just stock footage. Just a reminder, this movie was originally slated to be done by April 2011. Things went quiet for several months until April 22nd, 2013, when Gary posted a 12-minute long extended trailer.
The Empire of the Underworld has declared war against the land of Maradonia.
It all began in the Kingdom of Light.
What was it?
Many centuries ago, there was a mighty light carrier, Apollyon. He was the most beautiful and intelligent creature in the Kingdom of Light.
This finally showcased footage that had been hinted at on their Facebook page, as well as an abundance of stock footage. On the same day, Gary started an Indiegogo campaign, requesting monetary aid to continue production of the movie. He claimed they had filmed roughly a third of it so far and needed $20,000, but he also said this wouldn't cover the cost to finish the movie and they'd be back to ask for more in the future. Rewards included a speaking role and executive producer credit for the low price of $5,000. Or, if you're on a tight budget, you could get this Hobby Lobby mermaid statue for $1,000. Surprisingly, donations began to come in relatively quickly. Unsurprisingly, they were all from Gloria, and Gary had to make all donations anonymous after people discovered this. By the end of the campaign, they had raised only $1,500, the majority of which was likely from their own pockets. Even though Gloria was already occupied with writing, and acting, and producing, and directing, she wanted to pursue even more creative endeavors. And even though her parents were already occupied with financing the movies, they threw money at these new interests to try to make her famous. In the summer of 2013, Gloria was featured in an article on the blog Upcoming Celebrity. In fact, she was the only person ever featured on that blog, because it was yet another poorly cobbled together scheme to make her look like a celebrity. The whole thing is mostly identical to what was on the Maradonia website, with full-on copy-paste in some sections, although this time it included the claim Gloria was the valedictorian of her high school class and gave a, quote, mind-blowing speech, unquote, to hundreds of people. Last I checked, homeschooled kids don't usually get to attend public school graduation. The article heavily featured the modeling work she had been getting into around this time. Now, I don't know a whole lot about modeling, but she doesn't seem half bad at it. Though supposedly some of these pictures were taken when she was 17, and I'm not saying this is like a call the police level situation, but there's something really skeevy about parents showing off their underage daughter like this. Around the same time, the Tesches also began financing Gloria's newfound interest in producing music. There was apparently an attempt at a Christian rock career, though next to nothing of that remains aside from a mention in a video by former Encyclopedia Dramatica admin Easy Peasy. When this new career path wasn't an immediate success, Gloria ditched the Christian girl rock singer persona and began pursuing a rap career under the name Goldilocks. Her first single was called Wild for the Night, a ripoff of the A$AP Rocky song of the same name. This song and its accompanying music video have been privated, but a small clip remains on YouTube.
Weekend got me wild night, that's when I stopped being polite. Haters sound the same shit but a different name. If I need it, I'll go get it. If you want it, you can have it. Keep my smile looking good, and my haters looking bad.
Bars! All the way bars.
It's a generic fuck the haters song, and apparently the music video even featured a picture of Swank Ivy with the word ratchet written over her face. Mind you, this was 2 years after she had re-released her video criticizing the Tesches, and she had long since moved on to talking about other things. Also, there exists video of Gloria singing this song at an Applebee's karaoke night, which, if anyone has that clip, please contact me, I need that in my life. The music video for her second single, The Three Bears, was released in July 2014. It featured Gloria wearing one of those quote-unquote sexy Halloween outfits from the likes of Party City, as well as some kids wearing face paint and bear ears made from construction paper. I don't know why they went with children instead of adults, because it feels really weird when the focus of the song and video is how hot Gloria is, though it feels more like incompetence and poor direction rather than any kind of malicious intent.
I came out of a fairy tale, now I'm more real than a lot of them fake people trying to appeal. Too sweet to say a word, you should probably think again. I think before I speak and I got power in my pen.
During this time, things had gone relatively quiet on the Maradonia front. Posts from the Maradonia movie Facebook page indicated they were still working on the film, though updates were becoming fewer and farther in between. There was still no news about the sixth book, or any of the other books that had been promised in the Indiegogo campaign. Critics and gawkers began to wonder if the movie would ever be finished or released. In the summer of 2015, these doldrums would finally end with explosive news, though not the kind of news anybody had been expecting. If the Tesches' reputation had begun to crack in 2011 and 2012 with the revelation of Gary's past, it was completely shattered on August 25th, 2015. On that day, a person going by the name Robert Sockwell joined the gossip forum QE Farms and posted the following in the Gloria Tesch thread. Whoever is delusional about the Tesches having money has never driven by their now former house. They never paid a dime on the house to the banks for 9 years while living there. They are beggars and liars. All of them. Here is the link to their former disgusting shitbox of a home. They were finally evicted just recently. I wouldn't pay 2 cents for this bug and fungus-infested hellhole. Attached was a link to a Zillow listing for a home in Palm Harbor, Florida, the same town that had been linked to Gloria's family years prior in interviews. Other viewers of the forum were able to confirm that the Tesches had been living there and the home had indeed been foreclosed, but there was still disbelief about the legitimacy of this new information, as it flew in the face of the luxurious lifestyle Gloria and her parents had been presenting for years. It doesn't fit with the rest of what we know about Gloria. How do we know this isn't a rental that they own or some other investment property? It seems weird that a family with private jet trips and $2,000 mermaid tails would be inhabiting a home that the bank has deemed only suitable for handymen or investors. Unless they trashed it before the bank could get at it, but it doesn't look tore up cosmetically. Yet it would seem to me that the listing hints that there will be more than a few $1,000s worth of extra work required before move-in. The next day, Robert followed up with a post expanding on his accusations and dropping even more information about the crumbling state of the Tesch family. I can assure you that this is their house and they lived in it. They lived like cavemen and women. Their front door was constantly open. even in the hot summer months, exposing the house to the Floridian elements. The AC has not worked for years, and they could not afford to fix it. Whatever outward persona that is portrayed is a sham. They bought a house that they couldn't afford when the banks were giving away easy mortgages and never paid a dime. I've read many comments on this blog about how rich they are. 180 degrees wrong. I believe the parents got a divorce so they could take 2 times the amount of money from the welfare state. You might not believe it, but this is their pool. Have you ever seen anything so disgusting? That's really all I have to say about them. I just wanted to set you straight. There is no mansion. There is only deception. This time he included a picture of a swimming pool filled with so much algae that it looked like swamp water. Sure enough, it was the same pool featured in some of Gloria's modeling pictures. Robert continued by providing a list of Gary and Marina's various run-ins with the Pinellas County court system, which alongside a Tampa Bay Times news article confirmed nearly everything he'd been saying. After moving to Palm Harbor in 2006, Gary and Marina Tesch defaulted on their mortgage in less than a year. It turned out neither of them actually had jobs that could afford the nearly $500,000 house. The bank moved to foreclose in 2007, but the Tesches figured out a way to postpone the selling of their house by exploiting Florida bankruptcy laws. Gary would file for bankruptcy, freezing the sale, but then fail to follow through on submitting the necessary paperwork. The courts would throw out the incomplete case, the bank would be given the go-ahead to reschedule the sale, and then Marina would start the process all over again. The two traded off bankruptcy fraud duty like this just shy of a dozen times before the courts finally realized what they were doing in 2015, and banned them from filing for bankruptcy for 2 years, during which time the bank was finally able to sell off the house and kick them out. Shortly before the Tesches were kicked out of the Palm Harbor house, Gary was charged with 2 ordinance violations for the poor state of the house, which matched Robert Sockwell's accusations of the home being in disrepair. Despite the court records and news articles making it clear the Tesches had been involved in bankruptcy fraud for nearly a decade, people began to say that it was the movie that had bankrupted the family, which isn't the case. And I can prove this by pointing out a court case Gary was involved in May of 2012, where the courts found him financially insolvent. What was this case about? Well, this is where the story starts to take its darkest turn. If you're sensitive to issues of domestic violence, please skip ahead to this timestamp. Users on Kiwi Farms discovered that Gary had been arrested for domestic battery on May 4th, 2012. Based on the court records, it seems that the charges were dropped, although I could be reading it wrong. The records also show that the abuse going on in the Tesch household went beyond this one incident. On October 11th, 2011, Gary filed for a restraining order against Marina, citing domestic violence. This first request was denied, but when he tried again in November, he was granted a temporary injunction which was extended multiple times into March of 2012. Nearly a year after their divorce in 2014, Gary would again file for yet another restraining order against Marina on March 18th, 2015, yet again on the basis of domestic violence, but this one was also denied. Now, the few lines of text in the public court records barely scratch the surface of what must have been going on, and I don't have nearly enough information to begin pointing fingers and saying who was abusing who, so I won't be doing that. But I will say that whatever was going on top of the constant threat of losing the house, it couldn't have been a healthy environment for someone to grow up in. In light of all this, it makes a lot more sense why Gary and Marina were so desperate to make Gloria a star. They weren't the rich, delusional yuppies that critics assumed they were. They were effectively leeches who wanted Gloria to succeed so they could coast off her instead of getting actual jobs themselves. I think what best proves this is Jonathan, Gloria's brother. He had an interest in both skateboarding and video production, yet Gary never tried to promote his son as the next great thing in skateboarding or as an up-and-coming filmmaker. I'm not saying Gary should have done that, it's bad enough he turned one of his kids into a laughingstock in the pursuit of cash and clout, but it goes to show that he wasn't just a delusional parent wildly investing in his kids' interests because he blindly believed in their abilities. I think this also lends a lot of credence to the conspiracy theory that Gary had a much heavier hand in writing the books than he let on, possibly to the point of being a ghostwriter at times. Even in the first book, people were noticing bizarre syntax errors that could only be explained by a native German speaker doing word-for-word translation into English. Gary's history with the church would also explain the Bible plagiarizing. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Aragon movie came out in December 2006, and Gary was pushing for Gloria to finish writing a book in 2007. In case you're not familiar with that case, Christopher Paolini began writing Aragon when he was 15. His family self-published it when he was 18, and after an aggressive marketing campaign, the book was picked up by the Knopf publishing house. Knopf's own marketing campaign for the book heavily emphasized how young Christopher was when he had begun writing, and the media celebrated him as a child prodigy who'd gone from being self-published to being internationally famous. Gary was practically following these directions to the T, but with a book that was unedited tripe and not fun to read. I guess it's fitting that N.T. Schertogel would take such interest in Gloria's writing. After the Robert Sockwell bombshell, things went quiet again for several months, until a person named Bob joined the Kiwi Farms Gloria Tesch thread. They claimed to have a DVD copy of the Maradonia movie, as well as information about Gary attending the 2015 American film market. According to Bob, Gary had been in a near-panic state as he passed out DVDs to potential distributors. He claimed the film had cost $800,000 to produce, and practically begged for $80,000 from any buyer who would give him the time of day. And in typical Gary fashion, he tried to make the film seem more impressive by saying it was 40 minutes longer than it actually was. Although this was probably the worst place to do this, as most buyers attending AFM are interested in shorter films and would reject a movie with a 140-minute runtime without even watching it. As for what happened in the movie, Bob was more tight-lipped, but what they saw was bizarre enough that they dove down the Maradonia rabbit hole to figure out just how exactly it came into existence. In terms of people dying to see the movie, the experience is no different than seeing the cheesy and grandiose online trailer. It's just longer, more of the same. I haven't read her writing at all, but my sense from what I've seen described here is that the same things that make the book so awful apply to the filmmaking. You know how some bad movies are bad in a way that's fun to watch, but others are just irritating time sucks? For most people, this will be the latter. Only the most dedicated fans of whatever delusional madness fuels this train wreck will find all the WTF choices worth 102 minutes of their time. The most interesting thing in all of this to me is that my brother-in-law felt terrible for Gunter after checking out the movie. He thought Gunter was this poor, desperate guy who was wasting his time and about to have a horrible disappointment. After I saw the DVD and then Googled Gloria and saw Gary portrayed as a liar and con man, I told my brother-in-law about it so he wouldn't feel so bad. But his attitude didn't change. Why not? I'm guessing he was viscerally hit by the intensity of Gunter's desperation, which was no doubt genuine. For people like Gunter and Gloria, the endgame is seldom pretty. Now, this probably seems like a my uncle who works at Nintendo situation, especially when Bob refused to upload the movie online, but due to events we'll get into later, I'm pretty sure Bob's story is legit. Not long after this, Gloria posted a picture of her, Gary, and an unknown man all holding what appear to be contracts. The picture was captioned with, "Hard work pays off." When asked about what was going on, Gloria said she couldn't reveal any details just yet. And finally, on April 16th, 2016, over 6 years after the movie had been announced, and 5 years after it was supposed to wrap production, Maradonia and the Shadow Empire finally premiered at the Britain 8 movie theater in Tampa, Florida, for a single showing. It seems the event was attended mostly by the cast and crew, though some critics must have been in the audience as well, as commenters online began debating about the $800,000 figure Gary had given at AFM, and discussed specific aspects of the film to bolster their points. The stock footage and general production costs would easily be in the tens of thousands, especially in the hands of incompetent project leaders like the Tesches who didn't know what they were doing. But basic things like sound mixing were non-existent, and Gary allegedly didn't pay the cast, just as he'd done with the original director and cinematographer. These commenters were few and far between, however, and the majority were still waiting to see the film themselves. Their prayers would be answered before the end of the year, as Maradonia and the Shadow Empire was uploaded in its entirety to YouTube in October 2016. The video has a rendered for AFM 2015 watermark, giving legitimacy to Bob's claims from the previous year. The world could finally see this masterpiece the Tesches had been hyping up for years, the next Lord of the Rings, the new standard for epic fantasy cinema, and it was...
Do you hear me? 2 children will arrive in your land, and these children will show you your limitations.
We will conquer the whole world! My followers will fight you! You for eternities! Yeah! We will kill these children!
Bad. The movie is fucking terrible. I'm someone who likes a so bad it's good movie every now and then, and even with friends and alcohol, this thing is painful to sit through. It fails in every single aspect of filmmaking. The cinematography is bad. The directing is bad. The acting is bad. The lighting is bad. The special effects are bad. The costuming is bad. The sound mixing is non-existent to the point I'm pretty sure they were just slapping shit into Premiere without even touching the volume at all.
Have you ever thought that things happen for a reason? You know, like a destiny?
You hear that? Sound like horses.
Horses? Joey, look at those creatures from the caves!
It's just a bunch of fucking around with no plot and no energy. It's not even 2 hours long, but the pacing is so bad it feels 5 times as long.
You drugged her. We are not of your world, your music, or your songs. Everything you say is a lie. Your peace talks are lies. You just came to deceive us.
And it doesn't even have the earnest but incompetent amateur charm that movies like The Room or Birdemic have. There's no boardroom applause scene or lines on the level of tightening my belt so I don't feel hunger pains. Maybe it's just my knowledge on the subject coloring my perspective, but it really feels like something made just to turn its lead actress into a star. And with that, so ends the Maradonia saga. The 6th book was never released. The movie only exists through pirated copies. The Tesches had no more money to continue self-publishing or making movies. The House of Cards had finally fallen, and all Gary and Marina had to show for years of lying and making a mockery of their daughter were boxes of unsold books, eviction papers, and angry messages from cast and crew members demanding their money. Perhaps there really was no better way to close the franchise than with the end of Maradonia and the Law of Blood.
Gustafsson and 2 of his clerks brought several chalices served on a silver plate. He offered Maya and Joey a drink. Please drink with me. This is a day of celebration. The lakes are filled with water, and Grawl and Brutus, the evil orcs, are dead. Maya and Joey, very thirsty after the fight with the orcs, drank the whole content of the chalices with big gulps. The observer with the goatee and the pigtails grinned and raised his eyebrows as he looked at the mayor. Suddenly, Maya and Joey started to cough heavily, and realizing too late they were poisoned. The poison worked fast, and Maya and Joey fell over at the same moment, splashing into the sea of blood between the 2 orcs and the 3 warriors. Joey, what's happened? It's getting so dark and so cold around me.
Yes.
Maya, this is the end. Yes. These miserable people have poisoned us. With my last breath, I want to tell you that I love you. It was a wonderful journey with you, but I never thought death would come so fast. Maya and Joey slipped down into unconsciousness. They slipped deeper and deeper until they reached a very different place, a place packed with shadows, dancing and celebrating. Shadows of gnomes and creatures of the outer planes, but it was cold there. Very cold.
But I'm not done yet.
Stop! He's already dead.
You really thought that losing his house would be enough to dissuade Gunter Gary Tesch? No. Gary had an ace up his sleeve, a Hollywood big shot who saw the true greatness in the Maradonia saga that the haters and trolls had denied for years. A man who had the means to bring the series to the big screen where it was always meant to be. His name was Steven Naya, owner of the world-famous visual effects house Wardour Studios, who've done special effects work for films like Life of Pi, Men in Black 3, and Batman v Superman. What's that? You've never heard of Wardour Studios? And if you look through the credits of those films, you won't find that name anywhere? Well, what about Wardour Street Studios? Wardour Digital Effects? Quidam Studios? Yeah, I'm sure you can already see where this is going. Wardour Studios was founded by Steven Naya, previously Simak Shafi Naya, who used to work as a lawyer in California until he got caught defrauding his clients out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. He resigned before he could be disbarred in a classic "you can't fire me, I quit" move. He is now banned from practicing law in the state of California. That hasn't stopped him from lying about being part of the state bar. Sometime afterwards, he legally changed his name to Steven Naya and created Wardour Studios, although it was likely under a different moniker at the start as he's changed the company name multiple times like I mentioned earlier. With this new business, Steven was going to pursue his love of film, by which I mean pursue his love of money by, allegedly, scamming inexperienced filmmakers unfamiliar with the Hollywood industry. Inexperienced filmmakers like Gary and Gloria Tesch. You see, rather than build his portfolio naturally, Steven has a nasty habit of claiming credit for film work that he had nothing to do with. Along with the films I listed earlier, his IMDb page also credits him for work on blockbusters like Source Code, Real Steel, and Battle Los Angeles. And all of them have an asterisk next to them, meaning they are all unverified. On his Wardour Studios YouTube channel, he has unlisted videos showing off his company's work on Batman v Superman, which are just the behind-the-scenes footage ripped from the DVD that he then slapped his company's logo on. If you go to the IMDb page for the company, the unverified credits have been removed, leaving it with only a handful of no-name productions from China, none of which have been completed. The website is similarly barren of the previous false credits, though now features fake quotes of praise from Larry King and fake collaborations with Stan Lee. And because we live in a hell dimension where escape from NFTs is impossible, Steven was even getting into those before monkey JPEGs became popular. But for Gary, who was desperate to make some money back on the Maradonia movie and who had no knowledge of how things work in the world of film, Steven, with his list of fake employees and fake big-name film credits, looked like a dream come true. And in January 2016, he was the person Gary and Gloria signed the film contracts with. Rather than bring Maradonia and the Shadow Empire to the big screen, Steven was going to create a whole new movie with professional actors and visual effects. It would be called Maradonia: A Mermaid's Tale, and it was set to differ substantially from the source material. Namely, Joey would be the only main character because Maya was going to die in a hurricane very early in the plot. Gloria's excuse for not selling off the rights to, quote, New York, unquote, back in 2011 was fear that they would change too much of the story, yet her dad ended up giving Maradonia to a guy whose first decision was to kill off her self-insert. At the same time this was going on, Gloria became the host of a new show called Event Entertainment America. It only lasted 3 episodes, and the special guest each time was a guy called Dr. Richard Reichel, who wrote a self-published book about an acting method he made up. Richard seems to be the same type of Hollywood wannabe scam artist, allegedly, as Steven Naya. His website brags that it was him who convinced Jackie Chan to come to America, and how his film accomplishments have been recognized by the United States government, neither of which can be substantiated. He also tried to make some Christian puppet show for kids. It has nothing to do with Maradonia or Gloria, but it's some of the weirdest shit I've ever seen, and I have to show it to somebody.
Everything would have been great, Eve, but you listened to the evil serpent, and God told us if we ate from that special tree, we would die.
但是魔鬼说我们会像上帝一样，也知道好和坏。对不起，我不该听魔鬼的话。
What is happening?
Getting back to Steven, this is where the story devolves into pure hearsay. The person saying all this did provide some documentation proving that they had been doing research into Steven Naya's dealings, and multiple other people documented the film's connections to China while under Steven's control. But as with anything of this nature, take it with a grain of salt. According to Kings of Reality on QE Farms, Steven and Gary entered a partnership in March of 2016, Around the same time, Gary ended the trademark on the Maradonia name. Steven began approaching visual effects companies, investors, and scriptwriters in China, claiming he had the full rights to the Maradonia IP. I guess he forgot how easy it is to fact-check that because a writer who agreed to work on the project got suspicious and looked into it. It turned out that despite Gary giving up the trademark so Steven could take over, Steven hadn't filed for anything. The writer then refused to hand the script over because Steven hadn't paid them and he didn't have the rights to the work. And because Steven couldn't provide a script, the investors and visual effects house pulled out. The project collapsed in on itself, and the Wardow Studios page about the movie hasn't been updated in years. Gloria refiled for the copyright on Maradonia in 2016 and maintains it to this day. As far as anybody can tell, Maradonia, A Mermaid's Tale, is dead in the water. No pun intended. It would seem the Maradonia scam had been destroyed by this larger scam, as after this debacle, Gary finally ceased trying to make Maradonia successful. The website went down, the books were pulled from Amazon, Gloria promised a rewrite of the series, but years later, there's been no sign of it. She shifted her focus to modeling, singing, and a new book series that had nothing to do with Maradonia. In 2017, Gary decided to go back to his Christian roots, and created Liberty's Voice Ministries, along with a show called The Ark TV. To no one's surprise, the promotional material for his new ministry dedicated more space to begging for donations than it did to teaching the word of the Lord. He even tried to recoup some of his losses from the Maradonia movie by reusing the stock footage and music in Ark TV. Based on the few counts of the sermons, I don't think this was a particularly profitable venture. 1 year later, Gunter Gary Tesch died from heart health complications in March of 2018. Gloria set up a GoFundMe to pay for his funeral expenses and managed to raise almost twice as much as the movie did on Indiegogo. Many assumed Gary's death also marked the death of Maradonia, as Gloria took on the name Sophia Nova and publicly distanced herself from the franchise. She got a bachelor's degree in communications in 2019 and now works as a media specialist. She even self-published a new book that same year. It's called The Secret of Moon Lake, and she calls it her debut novel. I've heard it's substantially better than the Maradonia books, although it's still pretty bad writing, and it looks like she's still using sock accounts to bolster ratings with fake 5-star reviews on Goodreads and Amazon. And I didn't even have time to get into all the pictures she's stolen from other people and tried to pass them off as her own. It's assumed that, to this day, most of the cast and crew of the movie have not been paid. I did play the role of Ciara. No, I did not get paid yet. My husband Paris played the role of Demetrius. He did not get paid either. Also, my son played a role. He wasn't paid either. We are seeking to get paid for our hard work. But like the herpes that infect Gorgon Madonna, the Maradonia saga will never truly go away. Because on July 13th, 2021, Gloria filed for copyright on a new title, Maradonia and the Guardians of the Portal. There's been no other news about this development, and it's possible nothing will come from it, but for the time being, we still can't turn the page on the adventures of Maya and Joey in the magical world of Maradonia.